listening to the president's news conference as we were. Julian Castro has been listening with us as well. Mr. Secretary, what were your takeaways specifically on this topic?
Well, first, that the president struck a tone of moral leadership on several occasions, speaking, I think, movingly about the values that we have. And he talked about not denying access to a child who shows up at the border, and the alternative is to leave that child there in Mexico to starve. He spoke about the reasons that a parent would come over and bring their child. And he talked about, you could see also toward the end a little bit of his angst and impatience when he said, that if we don't get these things moving, some people are going to move on, and delivered a timeline, which he said that within 1 week, that 1,000 of these kids would be moving out of CBP facilities and onto either HHS-sponsored facility or perhaps one of the military bases. He talked about Fort Bliss, for instance, that are going to be used to house them. The other thing was that he had to keep pushing back against this false narrative that Republicans seem to be, fairly successful at so far, that somehow the numbers of unaccompanied minors we're seeing right now are radically higher than they were under Trump. They're not. In the last 9 months of Trump, we saw a 690% increase in the number of unaccompanied minors. There were periods in 2018 and 2019 when the number of unaccompanied minors in our custody was roughly similar, about the same as we see today. But you got questions to Biden about, is it your policies that have done this? So Republicans so far have been fairly successful at getting the media to bite, I think, on that line. Biden tried to push back on that. And then, finally, he's walking this tightrope because on the one hand, folks on the left absolutely like to hear that the administration is treating these children differently, that it cares about them, that it's moving quickly. On the other hand, for those of us on the left, we know, as Jacob mentioned, that Title 42, which the government is using to keep out a lot of people who would just claim asylum, was invoked by Trump. And the CDC has suggested that it was pressured to help invoke Title 42. So there was an expectation that Title 42 at some point would be lifted. But the language was, we're going to the vast majority of people who are trying to get in are being kept out. Most people are being sent back. That is, for people on the right, something that they probably want to hear. You see, again, a president walking this tightrope.
I'm also guessing, Mr. Secretary, you welcomed when he switched to conversational terms, when he said, and I'll paraphrase, it's not like there are families sitting around the table saying, yes, certainly, let's sell all our possessions to raise the money to send our children with a smuggler to a foreign land in search of a better life. He invoked his own Irish heritage. It's putting it in those terms that will make this struggle more real for Americans who are listening and paying attention.
Absolutely. I think that resonates with people just at a very basic human level. And he did that several times. He did that yesterday. And most importantly, I think he's taking action, which is to put the second in command, Vice President Harris, in charge of actually working with Mexico and these Northern Triangle countries to resolve these issues so that you can stem the flow of people, because you create more opportunity, more safety, more chance to live a good quality of life for them at home. So they don't have to make that very decision that he was talking about. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, the difference between how he speaks, how Biden speaks in human and compassionate terms about these immigrants versus the way that Trump used to speak and tweet is just day and night.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.